let's go over how Firebase works for the most part. So first we're going to save things to Firebase. I've got my Firebase app here. So all I did was go to console.firebase.google.com and then I clicked on my app. I'll see this screen and I'll go to Cloud Store Firebase. So I'll be able to start saving things to my database. And really this is sort of becomes second nature once you do it a few times. But at first, it might seem a little confusing. It's abstract. Where does this stuff going? Where is it being saved? Well, think of this as your database. This is all you need to know. And like we've seen in other videos, Cloud Firestore save things as collections and documents. So we're going to try to save some stuff. I have here in my app a couple of example classes. Obviously, your classes are going to be much different than this. This is purely for educational purposes. You don't have to follow this for your app. I'm just trying to explain how Firebase works, Firestore. So I have a CS item, which is the parent class that has location description. It has a no argument constructor, which is empty, which Firebase will need. So I'll just keep this there without anything on there. And then I also have another constructor with location description and ID, and then some getters and setters. I have a book, which uses super, like we've seen before, also has this no argument constructor because Firebase needs it. And then I have a phone, and a phone has a model, a book has an ISBN, and then the item has all the other stuff, location description and ID. So pretty straightforward. I'm here in my auth activity. Now I'm just going to run this app pretty quickly just to show you what it looks like. And what I've done is I'm just going to create a couple of objects. I'm going to create a Mobi object, which is a book with some location description. This random ID, which I created with UUID, it just gives me a random number, or a random set of characters, really. And then the ISBN is 99, and I did the same thing for phone, except the model is 3GS because a phone takes in a model as opposed to an ISBN. Now, to be able to use Firebase, we used this before. What is this doing really? Well, this is when we say get instance, what does that do? Well, really all we're doing is instantiating, and instead of writing this new Firebase Firestore, we just write it this way. Why would we do that? Why can't we just do new Firebase Firestore? Well, there's other things that happen that Firebase doesn't want to let us know. So they say you can't use new. We're going to use new. We know how to use new. And all you have to do is call get instance, and we're going to give you your database that's connected to this part right here. Fair enough. So I asked them for that object, that database object, and I can call it whatever I want. So I'm going to call it Firestore. I could call it DB as well. You'll see this a lot. You can call it DB if you want to. So up to you whether you want to call it Firestore or DB. I'm going to call it Firestore for myself. I've created these objects and now I want to save them. But where am I here? What is this method? What am I doing with it? Well, I want to be able to sign in at some point, and we went over how to sign up, but we haven't gone over sign in. So I sort of want to take step by step of how to get there. But first, I want to test my database with a few objects. So this login button is connected to this method right here. And then obviously right now it's not going to do anything other than log me in. It's going to click login, and it's going to print out a few things. So the method doesn't do anything, but for now, it's what I'm going to use to test these objects out. Eventually, the sign-in method is going to change. So again, you may follow this, but it's really not going to help. If you want to follow along and test out Firestore and play around with it, you may, but this sign-in method is going to change, FYI. So what's the first thing that I'm going to do? Well, first thing that will be easy to do is I'm going to call Firestore, and I'm going to create a collection of items. Think of this as a folder. So I'm going to create a folder called items. And then in that folder, I'm going to make a document that I'm going to make a file. And that file is going to be set to the Mobi object. So what is this going to do? I'm just going to move this up a little bit. This is going to just take everything from Mobi and it's going to save it. It's going to serialize it for you. So it's going to turn it into a string and then it's going to save it on the database. It's going to save it under items and then logos. So let's run that. We'll click terminate. I will get my app. I happen to have a password on it. I'll go okay here. And then I'm going to click on login. And once I click on login, then things on this database will happen. Okay. So move this over here, move this right here. I'll click login. Things get printed right here. And then things are going to be sent to my database over here. Nothing happens over so far. So I'm going to refresh it. Now that I refreshed it, it looks like I have some things that happen over here. And perhaps let me comment this part out, which is going to come later on. So I'm there we go. So what happened? Well, some things showed up on the screen. I'm going to delete this collection, everyone's items, and just do it again. Why would I delete the collections? Well, one, because one of them was something that I didn't intend on putting on here. And two, I'll delete collections almost after every time that we try this out. So let's try this again. Let's run the app, terminate it. Look at our database. We're gonna open up our phone. One, two, three, four. Go like that, and then click login. Some stuff is gonna happen. I'm gonna refresh this database over here. And then you're gonna notice that a collection called items was created, which is this one right here. Then a document called logos was created. And then iPhone 3 showed up. Great, yes, this is iPhone 3 right here, but what happened to my book? So I think I saved it first, and then I overwrote it. So to the same document, I set different information. So only the last information happened. So instead, I am going to make two documents. I'm going to go, one's going to be a book, and then the other one is going to be a phone. Okay, let's run that again. Let's try that out. I'm going to delete this documents right now just so you guys can see sort of a clean thing happening on here. And then I will go to click on login, refresh my database, see what's happening within it. And you're going to notice that now I have Lagos book and Lagos phone. Lagos has description, location, model, all of the things that a phone would have. And then you have it as a hash map, you know, description on one side and then the string on the right side. Okay, so I was able to create under the collection items, I was able to create two objects, two documents, one called Lagos book and one called Lagos phone. But what if I had more than one book? I don't want to call them all Lagos book. So I guess what I could do, and I'm going to go over here, and I'm going to take this up, is that instead of calling them Lagos book, I could call it something like Lagos book 1 and Lagos book 2. Sure, that would happen. But what about having my own collection of just books and my own collection of just phones? I think that would be much better. So instead of doing this up here where we put everything in one collection, like which is items, and then they're items, I have Lagos book 1, Lagos book 2, Lagos book 3. Let's just have a collection of books and a collection of phones. So we'll delete this. I'll go over here. I'll go items and I'll click delete. Perfect. So what's going to happen? I'm still going to have items. And then now I'm going to have Lagos, which is me. And instead of doing Lagos dash book 1, I can do Lagos books, book one, Moby. Okay, let's try it out. I'm still gonna put the same information here, but it's gonna show up slightly different. 1, 2, 3, 4. And since you know my password, you could log into my phone maybe? I don't know. Try it out. Anyways, so I have items here. Now I have this document for Lagos. Great. So all the things for this user, all of the books for this user, which is great. So if I had other users, I could put, other names here, and then they would have their own books and phones, which works really nicely. And if I click on books, I'll be able to find book one, which is here, book one. So I did books, book one. So a collection holds documents, but a document can also hold collections. Interesting. So what I did was created a collection of items which holds documents, Lagos, and that document holds collections, which holds books, and that collection holds documents, which is book one, and it can get kind of confusing as we go, but it certainly works. Here's cool book, and then here under the phones is phone number one. Okay, perfect. So that works, but then what if I wanted book number two? Like I wanted to create a book number two. We still have the same problem as we did before. So instead of book one, book two, and so on, and calling it sort of like us trying to figure that out, you'll notice that we have an ID. So let's just use that. We created a random ID for these books over here. Why have to name it ourselves? Why can't we just use the ID that we gave the book? So, and also, instead of calling it items, I'm just going to call it everyone's items, because technically I could create books for other people. So let's try to do that. I'm going to do, sure, the same book, but now it's going to be for Chandler, which is my wife. So Chandler only wants a book. We're going to have the same book, but we're going to put it in two different collections. Okay, so I'm going to go here. I'm going to delete this document. I'm going to back here. And then I'm going to go items, and I'll delete it. So we want to see what happens now. I'll run this app. I will click over here. I'll open it back up. The app shows up. Let's look at our database. We click on login, which calls all of this code. We refresh our database, and we'll notice that we now have a collection called Everyone's Items because we changed that name. Chandler has her own books. Lagos has his own books. If I click on books, now instead of saying books one, I just use the books ID. You're going to notice that the books ID is the same thing. So each document is going to have its own ID. And that way we can have many different documents without overriding them, because that's what happened at the beginning. We had the same name for the document and we end up overriding the other one. So now every time that we save a book, we for sure know that it's not going to be overridden. And then over here we have phones for Lagos. Lagos has his own phone. Perfect. And then Chandler. Chandler also has her own book, and you're going to notice that it has the same document name as my book because it's the same one. But now instead, it's just saved under hers. A little duplication for sure, but it's okay. Firebase knows how to handle that, so you don't have to worry about it too much. So what's going to happen now? Now I can get all the books that Chandler has, and now I can get all the books that Lagos has, which is really helpful. But we still kind of have a problem here. This is not as nice to write out. And to be honest, we should probably fix that. And we'll try to fix that by having a couple of new objects. So we're going to bring these objects over here. We're going to put them up at the top. I have Moby Old, iPhone 4. They have different IDs. They have all sorts of different information. And I'm going to start using those from now on. Great. I'm going to delete my collection over here. Now I have to type a little bit more, but that's okay. I click on delete and we're good to go. Okay, but how are we going to make this whole process easier? Collections, Lagos, phones, blah, blah, blah. That doesn't seem great, right? Well, I'm going to bring this over here. I'm going to uncomment it. And what am I going to do? I'm just going to say Firestore, store something at everyone's items, /logos /books, and then put in Moby old. So what's going to happen? Well, I am going to do the same thing that I was doing before over here, except now it's much shorter and a lot easier to read. It reads almost like a file path in your computer, which is much nicer. And what am I going to do? I'm still using the ID to store the document name, and then I'm setting this object that I created as Moby. So Lagos is going to have 2 books, 2 phones, and then Chandler is still just going to have 1 book. Okay, so if I run that again, I've now sort of simplified the way that I store things. I've made sure that there's no duplication, and I can just set information for an object. That works out pretty well. So I expect this to work. I click on login. Login is going to make some calls. I will go over here, see what happened. Everyone's items, we got books, and we'll notice that Chandler now has 3 books. Cool book, cool book, cool book. What happened there? Well, you know what? I clicked on login 3 times and it created 3 different IDs for the same object. So it happens that this get UID random creates a different random unique ID every time that this button's clicked. So it kind of messed up what I wanted to show, but it also showed something really interesting. So whenever you're using UID, be careful with that. You might not want to use that. And later on, I'll show you how to use Firebase's UID as opposed to Java's UID to make things happen. So here, I'll just click on this one time. This collection is going to update. I'm going to go ahead and refresh it. I have everyone's items. I have Chandler here. Chandler has 1 book, just like I expected. And then Lagos. Lagos should have how many books? Well, he should have 1 right here and 1 right here. So 2 books, 2 phones. So I go Lagos has 2 books and 2 phones. So this syntax is the same as this syntax up here, just quite a bit nicer, and it's much easier to use. But what if I want to get things out? You know, like what if I don't just want to store things? Obviously it's great to store things, but I also want to take things out of the database. What do? Well, you have to specify to Firestore what you want. And here I have some code already, but I'll retype that code. So what am I doing? I have to get my Firestore object, and I have to say I want to get some collection. So I give it the name of the collection. In this case, it would be everyone's items is the parent document or collection, sorry. Then the next part would be Lagos, then it would be books, and then it would be get the document that I want. So the document over here is this part right here. So in Lagos, everyone's items, Lagos books. So everyone's items, Lagos books. And then the document that I want contains the information that I want. So I want to say, here's the document, give it to me. And I have to give it this info right here. That's really long, and you're not always gonna know that. So you can do 2 things. You can say, just give me all the books, and then I'll do stuff with them. Or you can give me 1 specifically. So for now, we're just gonna do 1 specifically. Because I have the objects over here, I can just use here, Moby old dot get ID. So I do have that reference. So I know exactly what that ID is. So I can just get it. And then I can go with dot get. And you could stop right here. But this doesn't help a whole lot. This is going to return some Firebase thing called a document or a document snapshot. So like in this time, right now, when you just ask for it, what is in that document? What do you see? So Firebase is going to give you a snapshot of what's that in that document. But that takes some time because network calls take some time. As you saw in last problem set, it takes a while for it to go over there and then come back. And if you have to do that, it just takes a while. So what we're going to do is we're going to wait. And when this whole thing finally completes, then we want to do some stuff. So I'm going to say I'm going to add an onComplete listener. So onComplete listener, it will just say like, hey, when you complete, help me out. You can also do an onSuccess listener like I did here. It's really up to you what you like. This gives you a little more flexibility, not just on successes, but also on failures. So maybe you want to show the user an error that happened. And then here I'm just going to let this autocomplete. So I'm going to go on complete listener, the first one that comes up, and I want to click enter there, and it gives me a bunch of code. And that's great. That's all I really want to do. I put the semicolon here, and then what happens on complete? What do you want to do? Well, I want to check the task. So if the task was successful, then I want to do some stuff. Otherwise, I want to do some other stuff. Now, what happens from this task though? I wanted to get this document snapshot. So task.get result will give you this document snapshot. What is a document snapshot again? Well, a document snapshot gives you the information that you want. So from the document snapshot, and I call ts equals like that, I can get stuff from it. So I can like the document that it's going to give me is going to have all this information, but it doesn't know how to turn itself into the object that you want. So you have to tell it, the document that it just gave me, you need to turn it into an object that I can use. So in this case, I want to turn it into a CIS item. So I'll go CIS item, my item equals ts dot to object, and then I have to tell it what kind of object I want to be. So CIS item dot class. So this is going to turn into a CIS item object. But can I also do just directly into a book, because I already know if it's a book? I can, but let's look at a couple of things that might happen. So let's go to log.d, and then here I'm going to go with logos test, and I just want to log the item's description. And we'll go like that. So what's going to happen now? Well, when I click on the button, it's going to create some objects, it's going to save them, and then on that same button is going to retrieve it again. It would probably be better if I put this code in its own button. So whenever I click on it, I get the data back. But again, we're doing this for educational purposes. So we're just going to save it and retrieve it all at the same time. And one more time, I will just go ahead and delete this. Everyone's items. That's perfect. Click delete. Go right here. 1, 2, 3, 4. All good. And then what's going to happen? Save things. Get them right back. Old book. So I was able to get it. Here's my description. Logos test old book. Where's this other one coming from? Well, I have this other log right here that I'm getting. So I'm looking for this Moby old.getID. I was able to wait for it. Came back pretty quickly, and then I just got it as a CIS item. I know this is a book, so maybe I want to do something with the ISBN. But will I be able to? Let's try it out. So if I go my item dot get ISBN, it doesn't give me that option because this is not a book. This is a CIS item. So what do? Well, I could cast it. I could try to cast it and see if it works. And like we've seen before, maybe you can do something like this. But at this point, I'm fairly sure that this would not help us out. There is not information, even though it lets you do this at runtime when it's running, there's not information from this item to be able to turn it into a book. We've lost some information on the process. So let's try it out. Let's see what happens. We're not going to clear our database for now. We're actually just going to let the database update itself as we're adding new things. And remember, every time that we click on that button, it creates a new ID. So it's going to create a new book and it's just going to add things up. Oh, so we just completely crashed. What are we going to get? CS item cannot be cast to book. So we're a little stuck. What do? I just do it directly. I do book, my book, data snapshot, to object, book.class. So I'm saying turn the data snapshot, the document snapshot into an object. It's going to be of type book. Save it into this variable. And now instead of me casting it and doing all sorts of weird stuff, I can just do my book.getISBN. Let's run it again. And what I should get is the ISBN that I set this Moby old with, which is ISBN 88. I'm going to go back to my logcat. I should expect things to happen or not to crash. And it looks like I have one extra here, parentheses that I'm missing. I'm going to go over to here. I will click on login. Things will happen. Let's go to logcat and boom, ISBN 88. So I was able to get the description from here, and I was also able to get my book's ISBN again. So you can use this to save things and store things and get them back and turn them into the objects that you've created as long as they have all of the necessary information. Let's try one more thing. Can I turn this data snapshot into a phone? Would I be able to do this? Well, the data snapshot has no idea whether it can or not turn itself into a phone. And we'll get the model out of it. So it's going to try to do this, and let's see if it's able to do this. I actually don't know what's going to happen right here, and I am very curious to see what happens. So I go log in, and we crash. Why? Well, it looks like it can't turn itself into a book. Here we go, auth activity 89. Auth activity 89 is in this spot over here. It can't do it. It wasn't able to do what it needed to do, and it actually gave you a really strange error that there's a null pointer exception because it couldn't find something that it was looking for. So it tried to do it, and I think it ended up being at null over here. And then it tried to do null. My book ended up being null, and you try to do get model on null, so it didn't work. So that's it. Now you know how to send things to Firebase and get them back, and you'll have to think about how to organize your data to be able to put it in the correct spots. Now, one last thing: if I organize everything into books, then I'll know that I can cast all of these into a book. And if I organize everything into phones, then I'll know I can be able to cast all these into a phone. So I'll be able to do DS2 object, phone. But if you put them all into the same slot, say they're all into items, then there's no way to really cast them unless all you really care about is to cast them all into the parent CIS item. So it's really up to you how you want to design your database for this to be able to work well.